Are your people working hard but not reaching their full potential? The problem is not effort, it is development. At the Modern Observer Group, we transform workforce development into real performance. Our human-centered achievement programs help your team think better, communicate stronger, and execute at a higher level. That means higher employee engagement, stronger leadership, and measurable results across your organization. If you want a workforce that performs, leads, and delivers, it is time to invest in your people. Visit modernobserver.com and discover how the Modern Observer Group helps you build a workforce that wins.
Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Radio. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And some very interesting things are happening in the Democratic Party. Some of it is amusing, some not so amusing. And on the amusing front, we have an Alaska senatorial candidate, and she's running in Alaska, and obviously, and Kamala volunteered to go campaign with her, and this candidate say thank you, but no thanks. Pretty interesting, I'd say. I think again, we'll talk about betting markets, in a little bit in terms of politics. But they had Kamala only a couple months ago as the leading candidate. I think she's completely flaming out. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would say flaming out. She never recovered from the 2024 election. And to be fair, go back to 2022, you had Democratic candidates begging Joe Biden to stay away from their campaign events.
That's true.
So this is not really surprising. What is surprising is the fact that it's happening more and more often. Prior to the Biden administration, nobody ever told a sitting president or a former president or vice president to stay away from their, from their campaigns. Everybody wanted the president's endorsement, the vice president's endorsement. The Biden administration seems to have just tossed that out the window.
Well, it was well earned.
Yes,
I mean, the Democrats are filled with, let's say, less than Mensa candidates. But Kamala, I'm going to miss her if that is the case, because I've never I've never seen a political candidate on a high level be dumber than her, devoid of any original thought, a complete moron. How she ever became a lawyer is beyond me. Oh, she did flunk the bar exam. But anyway, yeah, your thoughts on that? I mean, is there any original thought in that skull?
I don't know. I just kept thinking Dan Quayle was probably loving Kamala's vice presidency because she made him look like a Sigma Chi. He was a fucking Mensa candidate compared to her.
100%. So actually, you have Biden administration. Basically, there's two people. Jimmy Carter, before he died, was probably every day praying. He was a religious man, saying thank you, Joe Biden.
Yes.
And now you have Dan Quayle. He's probably saying, yeah, there you go. But yeah, I will miss her. But that points to the larger issue of the Civil War, the splitting of the Democratic Party. And in preparation for this podcast, you brought up, as always, amazing point to me that has huge ramifications for the midterms and possibly beyond. And that is, as this split continues and becomes more pervasive, you have Democrats who've lost their primary now running as independents, even potentially in our own state of Connecticut. You have John Larson, another Mensa candidate, by the way, He may run as an independent. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it is becoming more and more common that they are at least exploring runs as independents. So, and this is not the socialists or the moderates, this is both sides. They are completely incapable of supporting each other, which, quite frankly, the party cannot survive that. If one does not get a victory fairly quickly, you may actually see the demise of the Democratic Party, because you cannot be running against yourself. Take a look. This is what happened in the mayor's election in New York City. The whole reason that Mondami was able to win was that Andrew Cuomo split the moderate vote with the Republican, Curtis Sliwa. So you're seeing this. It's not going to end well. And it was actually foretold by none other than Hillary Clinton. She stated a couple of weeks ago that the moderates cannot support the socialists because the socialists refuse to support the moderates. And at that point, you've got a split that may be unable to heal.
I think it's increasingly, in a certain time, it was just maybe a talking point. I don't see how the party gets back together. It's basically it's such a divide in ideology, in thinking, that there's no common area. And I think that that'll be interesting. I think Schumer's finished.
There really isn't any common area between the two. And honestly, the only way I see the party surviving this is if the moderate Democrats actually force in some sort of a rule saying, if you are a Democratic Socialist, because remember, Democratic Socialist is a separate organization, you cannot run as a Democrat. Short of that, I don't really see any way for this to end well for them.
No, then the Democratic Socialists / communists have all the energy. And speaking of energy, the betting markets now have AOC, who just froze her eggs and dumped her boyfriend, as the leading candidate, most likely to be the candidate in the upcoming soon-to-be presidential election. What's your thoughts? AOC, another Mensa candidate. And again, if I was an accreditation bureau, I would seriously consider yanking BU, which is a very expensive school, accreditation. At least they should not be able to offer a degree in economics, which she received.
Yeah, it actually doesn't surprise me that the betting markets are calling AOC the presumptive candidate at this point, because she is a social media darling. As dumb as she is, she's got the momentum of low intellectual voters,
which are increasingly a bigger size of the pie.
And these are the people that show up in primaries. So it could end up being, unless, of course, like in the past elections, the DNC decides to rig the primary in favor of someone more moderate. They did it for Hillary against Bernie. They did it for Biden against Bernie. They did it for Harris, basically just saying, forget about the primary. But the Democrats haven't had a legitimate primary since 2008. So the question is, will they have a legitimate presidential primary? If not, they may block AOC altogether, like they've been. And they do have the superdelegates, which, quite frankly, if you look historically, the superdelegates were put in place specifically to stop candidates like AOC from getting the nomination.
Yeah, it would be interesting if she is the candidate. I remember the 84 election when you were just a little bouncing
Yeah.
baby boy. But when Mondale got destroyed by Reagan, I think this could be on that level. She
It
is
could,
so dumb. There's so many sound bites and clips of her just being retarded. You can't, there's so much material, you can't put it into one campaign.
yeah, it's very possible that if she gets the nomination, she will be blown out. I don't think it'll be a Mondale level
I don't think
blowout
so either.
because I think she could actually manage to take New York, Michigan, California, the states that, quite frankly, may be beyond help. However, I think it's very important to remember that 2 years before the 1992 election, in 1990, nobody had heard of Bill Clinton. 2 years before the 2008 election, 2006, nobody had heard of Barack Obama. So there's still a very strong possibility that the actual candidate will be someone that is completely off our radar.
And if you're a Democrat, you should pray for that because, yes, I 100% agree. It's not going to be a Mondale Reagan situation, but I don't think she'll win Michigan. She'll win California, New York, possibly Connecticut, because Connecticut's completely insane, and Massachusetts. There you go.
Yeah,
But it won't be. It
I
won't
mean,
be
there's a
pretty.
couple of other states in Rhode Island that's possible. She'll take Chicago, so I don't know if that's enough to give her all of Illinois. But so she can actually take certain pockets of the country, but not enough to win an election.
You know. So speaking of elections and the Democratic Socialists, I basically call them what they really are, and that's communist. So you have Mandani, and he's increasingly failing as mayor of New York. Surprise, surprise. He's never having a real job. Same is true for Katie Wilson in Seattle. Never really had a job. I'm not so sure she's basically all there. But then you also have Mandani's crazy wife, who's essentially a not in her right mind, and is basically a supporter of terrorism. She wants to go to Syria and Lebanon on New York City's dime. These people never worked. They don't even understand any boundaries or anything else. And yes, he has a crazy wife, but I think the two of them are both failing. Katie Wilson might be recalled. And why is that important? Because I think when people are looking at voting, which is coming up in 2 months in the midterms and 2 years after that, they're going to look at the performance. And I think it's a real issue because if, which is not the case, Mandani or Katie Wilson was doing well, that would put some wind in the sails of democratic socialism. Your thoughts about the performance and their impact on elections or the election coming up?
Yeah, well, we talked a little bit about this last week. Mondani is actually essentially killing the Democratic Socialists because he's doing so bad. Prior to him and the Seattle mayor taking office, the Democratic Socialists got the wind beneath their sails because of Congress. Well, if you take a look, Congress by itself does not actually do an awful lot. You've got 200 or so, I'm forgetting the actual number, but 200 or so Congress people representing districts all over the country. So each one does not actually do a lot on their own. They can try to use the media to make themselves look busy. If you take a look at the Senate, there's only two really far left that have succeeded in the Senate. That's Sanders and Pocahontas. So the two mayors are the first democratic socialists that ever actually had to do something where it's blatantly obvious when they fail.
Yes, I think that is a huge point. And getting back to, we talked about the state of the Democratic Socialists. I believe that Bernie couldn't happen to a nicer son of a bitch. I think if the midterms go down in flames for the Democrats, or they get impacted by the Democratic Socialists, I think his shtick is going to be over. I think it's in process of being over. A guy that never did anything his entire life until he, and nothing as a senator. This is his big Elvis final tour, and it's not, I hopefully, and I believe is true, not going to go well. Your thoughts?
No, I don't think it's going to go well for him. And yes, he is the one that opened the door for all of this. He is the one that was pushing socialism. And I never understood why the Democrats kept allowing him to run as a Democrat on the presidential tickets, because he was never a Democrat. He was always an independent democratic socialist who would change his party to Democrat for the presidential races. So it amazed me that they always allowed him to do this. This is basically what the democratic socialists learned. They learned as independents, they weren't going to be able to do anything. They needed the identity of the Democrats to gain any kind of credibility. And unfortunately, the moderate Democrats rolled over and gave it to them.
Interesting concept. I've never heard that thought anywhere else. And the thought of the salient point is, by the Democrats not having the ho-hos to say, no, you can't run as a Democrat, they let in the fox to the hen house, which is
Yes.
Bernie. And in the end, he's probably the person that most is responsible for destroying the party.
That's very true. Bernie was always, and again, I think the biggest mistake Hillary Clinton ever made was in the 2016 primaries saying, well, there's not much difference between what Bernie Sanders was saying and what she was saying. Now, I've never been a fan of Hillary, but she was always a moderate. And she threw that away in 2016 because she saw Bernie creeping up in the polls and she wanted to jump on that bandwagon. Well, now we see the results of those moderates giving up to the DSA. And now she's starting to come back, speak out against the socialists, because, of course, this is a woman who can never let any political opportunity pass by. She has always been a political opportunist and nothing more. And now she's trying to rally the Democrats to fight the DSA that she herself had a big hand in bringing in.
100%. Could not argue with that. And we look at another very interesting point, and I think it has political, economic, social implications, and that is Gen Z. They just got out of graduated college, at least this age group. They graduated college, and 60% of companies have already fired a Gen Zer. I think that's huge implications for higher education, not teaching any these kids. So here's what I thought about when I looked into this. So you have a problem, colleges, right? Because they're graduating people that no one wants to hire. Okay. So you think they would have the wherewithal to say, okay, there's a problem, there's a skills, there's a behavioral deficit that we need to clean up, and you think they'd address it, but they don't. So they're graduating kids who can't function in the workplace, both from a social perspective and I think a skill set. And I think that has huge implications because I've heard this several times that revolutions don't happen. And you can see this in the in recent elections. Black and Hispanic, and this is the underprivileged people are not or lower on the economic spectrum are not voting for these democratic socialists. It's these recent college libtards who graduated, especially Ivy League schools with worthless degrees. They're pissed, and I've seen this on several times that they thought they were guaranteed a certain spot in life. So why is this important? It's because if they're failing in the workplace, they're not going to find employment. That's, to me, very important because even back in the day, you could graduate college and have some, far left attitudes, and that would all go away in your first job. However, there's a huge problem when you don't get that first job. Your thoughts? A lot there, but your thoughts.
Yeah, there was an old political adage. If you're under 30 and you're not a liberal, you have no heart. If you're over 30 and you're not a conservative, you have no brain. And we're seeing that sort of fall apart because college is not preparing people for the real world. And you're actually seeing, we were talking about the civil war within the Democratic Party. You're now seeing a civil war within colleges because I think at last call, it was approximately 30,000 professors are calling for radical change in the curriculum and in the college structure because they are tired of pushing students through who should not even be in college.
Can I interject from my own experience being an adjunct professor for 25 years? Time does fly. And I'm sorry to say, and it's from my actual direct experience, that no one fails college. Unless you just walk out and never go to a class. And that might even be in dispute. But it used to be you could actually fail college, right? And now I think everyone gets a C. To show up, write some bullshit on a paper, don't punch the professor out. It's a C. So you're graduating people that don't know shit.
Yeah, there's a major shift that has happened over the last 20, 25 years or so. And it's not just higher education. This goes on in K through 12 as well. And part of it is with parents, because we've got this helicopter parent generation who was overprotective of the kids. When I was growing up, if your parent was called into school to meet with the teachers, the first question was, what did you do? The parents always assumed the teacher had a very good reason for calling them in. They wanted to know what you did, how they were going to have to punish you, and how you were going to move forward. Now, if a parent is called in, the parent blames the teacher for what their kid is doing. So if the kid's not doing their homework, somehow that's the teacher's fault now.
100%. And even it's worse than that. As a ex-teacher, newly retired, it's really out of control. And this is a serious matter. It's no joke that when I was in high school back in the day, I don't know, maybe not even 1% of the kids were on special ed, IEPs, all that crap, right? It's definitely over 50. So what is the point? You had kids that were lazy, stupid, and just basically didn't give a shit. And back when I was in school, yeah, they would flunk out or whatever, try to get a tutor or whatever. Now everyone's in an IEP. So Johnny, it's, again, to your point, it's not Johnny's fault, it's the system. And now you have to give Johnny extra time, and they can go to a special room. And people, so I had kids go to the special room in quotations, and the special ed teacher essentially would give them all the answers. That's a fact. That's not a joke. And yes, so I'd get these tests back, and it was like written on a college level for a kid that's a dumbass. Duh, how do you think that happens?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
that's part of the big problem. You cannot say the kid is not capable of doing this work. We're going to leave him back so he repeats the grade and takes another shot at learning it. Schools don't leave students back anymore. Because that hurts their self-esteem. It's not
100%.
good for them. It's like, no, if they cannot pass the class, they need to be left back.
I 100% agree. And before we move on this real quick, there is a state that's doing that, and that's Mississippi. Used to be at the bottom of the bottom in education. It's in, I think, the top 5 states now, and they have less to work with in terms of the demographic pool. Okay. Um, and the funny thing about it is they actually do hold you back. If you can't read at a certain level at 3rd grade, you're not going on. Maybe New York, Connecticut, and those other libtard states should take a page out of always looked upon, down upon Mississippi.
Well, California, University of California, is graduating illiterate students because they decided that anybody that goes to the California public school system is automatically accepted at University of California in any one of their branches. Well, the branches decided, well, we're going to stop doing remedial. We're just going to push them through. We're going to get rid of that requirement. So now you've got college students graduating who can read, write, and do math at a 4th grade level. And you wonder why they're being fired from jobs because they can't follow directions.
Yeah, well, they know their transgender identity. They know that Palestine or Israel's occupying Palestine. Reading, writing, maybe basic business math, that probably is not going to happen. But just like Bernie, or the Democrats let Bernie into the hen house, well, there was repercussions from that. There's also repercussions from what you just outlined, and that's the devaluation of a college degree. It ain't worth shit.
That's
Ain't worth
true.
shit.
There is really no reason to pay all of this money to get a 4-year college degree unless you're going into the sciences. If you're going into biology, physics, if you want to be a doctor, then there's a reason. But quite frankly, if you're not good enough to get into college, on your own with those skills, you should not be looking at those careers.
No.
And
Very
quite frankly,
intriguing.
I mean, yes, you require the 4-year degree to go to law school, but quite frankly, just over the last year, I have met so many attorneys who, quite frankly, when I was in school, they wouldn't have passed. And I'm not talking about
Oh, yeah,
passing the bar, I'm talking about passing college classes.
Oh, no, it's hysterical because there's such a proliferation of law colleges that are they're having, basically law degrees, that they have to fill the seats. It's a for-profit business, colleges. So anyone, there's no real standards. Surprise! So you go 4 years to be a lawyer, and you're an ambulance chaser. That sounds fantastic to me. Again, we talk about failing. We have Swalwell, who's disgraced at this point. Looks like that Fang a little affair might bite him in the ass.
Yeah, the FBI declassified documents from his interviews where he admitted to the relationship with the Chinese spy. He admitted to not just a sexual relationship, but she was putting interns in his office.
Oh, excellent.
Oh, yes. And I think it's very important to point out that these interviews were conducted in 2014 and 2015. So you can't go, oh, well, Trump is going after political enemies. No, this was under the Obama administration that this was found out. And it had been kept under wraps because it was classified until this past week.
Yeah. We'll talk about a fall from grace. Again, probably his biggest accomplishment. Fang's pretty hot, so that's an accomplishment. His other big accomplishment was farting on MSNBC. That was excellent too. Good job. Now this I'll throw out to you: Paramount versus California. Talk about that, Dr. Lopkin.
Yeah, this has become very interesting. Background is Paramount agreed to merge with Warner Brothers. There were antitrust considerations. The DOJ signed off on it. The FCC signed off on it. The FTC signed off on it. Every international regulatory board signed off, all saying this is fine. California and 11 other liberal states decided they wanted to block this. Well, now Paramount is telling the courts that the states have to put up $1.3 billion as a bond. And they are pointing to the antitrust laws that state that the plaintiff in these cases is required to put up this money to compensate Paramount Warner Brothers for the loss in holding up the merger if Paramount actually wins. Now, given that every other governing body has already said, yes, there is no problems with this, the only reason that these 12 Democratic attorneys generals are doing this is because they don't want Barry Weiss, formerly of the Free Press, now in charge of CBS News, to also be able to take over CNN, because they know Barry Weiss is not going to take their word for anything. She's actually going to have reporters investigating them. So now the Attorney General of California, who's leading all of this, is yelling up and down, oh, David Ellison, the head of Paramount, is grasping at straws. He's trying to make a big deal out of nothing. It's like, no, they're the ones grasping at straws. They don't stand a chance of winning this. And on top of this, Paramount has already announced they are considering leaving California. So these 12 attorneys generals are spending over $1 billion for this bond in taxpayer money, plus the costs of the case itself of taxpayer money, to hide their political baggage, and they're costing their states tax money, revenues, because when Paramount Warner Brothers doesn't do business in your state, you're going to get in trouble. And not only have the regulators cleared this merger, the movie theaters, Cinemark, AMC theaters, Regal Cinemas, have all come out in favor of the merger. The DGA, the Directors Guild of America union, one of the other unions from behind the scenes of motion pictures, have said, yes, the merger is of less concern to them than the lawsuit, because what the attorneys generals are doing are costing the workers money.
Interesting, though, these state courts really have no chance of winning, and it gets back to the Constitution. That is, federal initiatives supersedes the state. It's called federalism. That's a fact. That's in the Constitution.
Yes. Well, but even if the state judges do actually find for the AGs, you know it's going to end up at the Supreme Court, who's going to look at the preponderance of evidence and go, you don't have a case.
So these judges never read the Constitution. Gee, that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Hello?
Well, to be fair, we have 3 Supreme Court judges right now who never read the Constitution.
Maybe can't read. But anyway, that's another issue. Well, Dr. Lopkin, another great edition of Carnivore Radio, and our listeners can certainly participate in the process, can't they?
Yes, let us know what issues you care about. What's your opinion? You can message us at the Carnivore Radio Facebook page. You can also go to xvadio.com/connect. Let us know what you're thinking. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Carnivore Radio wherever you listen to podcasts. And of course, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Radio at xvadio.com, the Carnivore Radio website, the Apple Podcast app, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. I'll see you next week.
We'll see you then.